Hi, my name is Brian Syzdek. I'm a clinical psychologist and the product manager at Stoelting. We're a publisher of psychological assessments. I'm going to go over a few of our psychological assessments with an emphasis on those useful in the neuropsychology space. The Lighter 3 is a completely nonverbal test. Now, why should you be using a nonverbal test? Well, if you're working with anyone with a language or communication issue, English language learners, people with hearing difficulties, if you're using a traditional verbal test, you're really going to misrepresent their abilities. Also, verbal ability is tied into SES, so you might be assessing more of those factors rather than underlying issues. This test is completely nonverbal, different than some others that do have verbal administration and responses. It assesses in areas of cognitive, attention, and memory, so you get composite scores there. That covers a lot of the referral issues you're typically likely to get. It's efficient. There's 10 total subtests, and you only need to give 4 to get a cognitive score, 2 for attention, and 2 for memory. And you can use any of those composites as needed. The Lighter 3 also breaks out processing speed. It's not involved in the cognitive tests at all, so you're not seeing those factors creep into what you're assessing. It's current with current population demographics. A lot of specific clinical groups were included in the validation sample and used for ages 3 to 75, so it covers a lot of ground. Another test is the Stroop color and word test. We have a new normative update version of the Stroop. The Stroop is a classical efficient test of executive functions, including inhibition and processing speed. It's widely researched, used a lot in clinical trials. And the current version has been updated to reflect current U.S. demographics, to use some updated psychometric techniques to analyze the properties of the test, to clarify administration scoring and interpretation procedures, including giving you an administration protocol for use in research or clinical use, and then to update the literature review with current research. There's a new scoring application that produces dynamic reports and interpretation. And you can find my poster on the Stroop update at the International Neuropsychological Society Conference that gives some more information about this. There's also a nonverbal version of the Stroop. There's a nonverbal Stroop on the Lighter, but this standalone nonverbal Stroop is done with cards, with administration, and is shown to elicit the same effects as the classic verbal Stroop color and word test. The checklist for autism spectrum disorder is a short parent-administered interview. There's a long-form version, which is only 30 questions, and a short-form interview that is 6 questions, the most diagnostic from the long-form version. The CAS-D is DSM-5 compliant, viewing autism as a single spectrum disorder and assessing in the different domains that DSM-5 criteria for autism covers. It has high diagnostic accuracy, so even though it's short and quick to administer, 15 minutes, it has 99% degree accuracy in diagnosing autism, even in the presence of comorbidities, and goes down to age 1 to 17. The neuropsychological assessment of adults with visual impairments, the NAVI, is a complete battery. It's the only combined text and neuropsychological assessment for individuals with blindness. And so there's really 2 parts. There's a manual that is really more like a textbook. It reviews all facets of neuropsychological assessment of those with visual impairments, covers areas that you want to assess, gives you information, and provides recommendations for other tools you can use. So some people get just the book alone for information about assessing these individuals. And then there's also a kit. And so there's a separate manual that covers administering the assessment. It's a complete battery assessing cognitive and neuropsychological domains, how to do that with individuals with blindness. And it's not sufficient if you're working with anyone with visual impairments to only use existing verbal assessments in a non-visual way. That's only covering one aspect. If a person has a visual disorder, then you're not going to, the results are going to be compromised. A new therapeutic tool that we have is the Kessler Foundation PRISM Adaptation Treatment, the KF-PAT. This is a complete course of treatment for spatial neglect, which is an issue that commonly arises as a complication of stroke. Up to 30 to 50% of individuals experience spatial neglect. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of clinicians don't assess for that, but it can really complicate their recovery. It creates visual deficits, and could have all kinds of treatment and danger applications. The KF-PAT treats neural networks, so you see sustained improvement. It's not a device, it's not a modification. It is built to address spatial neglect at a deep neural level. It's evidence-based. We have a list on our webpage for the KF-PAT about a lot of research that's been done with it to show its use and lead to improvements in vision as well as other functional areas, recommended by a lot of associations. It's very easy for people to use. The KF-PAT's modular, so it can be implemented in different settings. People with stroke are able to use it, and even those with limited mobility can experience benefits. And you'll see those even after just 10 sessions with just 20 minutes per session, some improvements. Another new assessment is the Sensory Assessment of Neurodevelopmental Disorders, the SAND. This is an assessment for classifying sensory reactivity issues. And why would we want to do that? Well, different types of sensory reactivity are very different and necessitate very different types of treatment. And auditory hyporeactivity is very different than a tactile seeking disorder. Also, just relying on parent reports like what you would get in a checklist has limited reliability. You're relying on parents to have good insight and are able to quantify the sensory reactivity that their child is experiencing. And we also want output that summarizes in a very direct and pointed way what the critical sensory issues are, where it's classified in terms of the behavior and the sensory modality that's impacted. And this will also help in autism diagnosis. So the SAND is the first clinician-administered observational assessment and interview. It combines both those sources of information for optimal information. That's keeping with gold standard practices in autism assessment. It directly examines sensory hyperreactivity, hyporeactivity seeking, and then across different domains, visual, tactile, and auditory domains. It's not dependent on verbal ability, so it's appropriate for use with those with limited verbal ability, severely affected populations. And it's efficient. It can be used by clinicians who have completed the training across a variety of disciplines. So those are just some of the assessments we have available. Please feel free to reach out. We're always available and eager to help get you set up with some tests you need based on the needs that you have. And here's some links for some of the assessments that I described. Thank you.